Afua Hirsch, Brit, Ish getting under the skin of Britain's race problem. In Brit, Ish getting under the skin of Britain's race problem, author Afua Hirsch explores the complexities of identity, particularly in regards to the concept of Britishness and its intersection with race. The book challenges the conventional narrative of Britain as a tolerant, inclusive society, and highlights the experiences of people of color who often feel out of place due to racial, ethnic, or religious backgrounds. British identity, the impact of Brexit, and historical aspects like the transatlantic slave trade are all examined to reveal a deeply rooted racial inequality in today's Britain. Lucid and thought-provoking, this book summary will shed light on the challenges faced by people of color in the UK and provide insight into the nation's evolving identity.
Unraveling complex identities. All individuals carry a complex, multifaceted answer to the question, who are you? This answer forms our identity by blending individual and social characteristics. As humans, we define ourselves through personal traits, interests, and hobbies, but also through social affiliations such as our political or ethnic group. The concept of identity becomes even more intricate as social groups possess unique identities as well. Britishness serves as an example, as what it means to be British has long been contested and can be divisive based on ideology. The 2016 Brexit referendum displayed dormant social tensions, further emphasizing the need for a deeper understanding of our intertwined identities. As we journey through life, we all hold a multifaceted response to the query, who are you? Our answer to this question shapes our identities, which are constructed by blending both individual and social aspects. As unique individuals, we define ourselves by our specific personality traits, hobbies, and passions. Moreover, as social beings, we find our place in a variety of group affiliations such as political parties or cultural communities. It is the dynamic blend of these personal and social attributes that create the complex tapestry of our identities. This complexity is further magnified when considering that every social group we belong to possesses its unique identity and methods of self-definition. The struggle for a clear definition of belonging becomes increasingly evident as these identities are persistently debated and scrutinized. The concept of Britishness illustrates this intricacy perfectly. As individuals identify as British, they grapple with the profound uncertainties surrounding their national identity. Inquiries like, what does it mean to be British, and what values does British society uphold, exemplify the struggle to define belonging. This challenge is especially contentious when political ideologies diverge, such as the opposing viewpoints on the Brexit referendum in 2016. The social tensions that emerged during the Brexit proceedings underline the importance of understanding our interwoven personal and social identities. As we strive for clarity in defining ourselves and the groups to which we belong, the challenge remains in untangling this complex web of interconnected characteristics. Brexit and British identity. Brexit unearthed contrasting perspectives on British national identity among Leave and Remain voters. Remain supporters generally held a more inclusive view, welcoming immigrants, whereas Leave voters were often driven by anti-immigration sentiments. These sentiments were fueled by propaganda from groups like the UK Independence Party and led to a spike in racially and religiously motivated hate crimes post-referendum. This divide highlighted the underlying assumption that being white is a marker of Britishness, which is evident in subtle interactions and misconceptions about heritage. This problematic belief is far more pervasive than just among xenophobic Leave voters. Diving into the intricate topic of Brexit, it's important to recognize that generalizations about the referendum have their limitations due to the complex demographics and motives behind those who voted Leave or Remain. However, it is possible to identify distinct differences in how both sides perceive British national identity. Remain voters were often more open-minded, embracing an inclusive identity welcoming immigrants to the UK. On the contrary, many Leave voters held a more exclusive notion of identity that rejected immigrants. It's crucial to note that not all Leave voters were driven by anti-immigration views, but the Vote Leave campaign's victory was largely fueled by these sentiments. In the lead-up to the referendum, groups like the UK Independence Party propagated anti-immigration propaganda, which attributed various societal issues, from housing shortages to traffic jams, to immigrants. Consequently, racially and religiously motivated hate crimes surged by 41% in the month following the referendum. While distinctions exist between immigration, race, and religion, many white Britons often overlook these differences and mistakenly link brown skin, foreign-sounding names, or Islamic faith to being an immigrant. Afua Hirsch, a British citizen with British parents, experienced this firsthand when a taxi driver asked her if she was going home soon after the Brexit vote. This type of language reflects the assumption that being white is one of the markers of being British. For white Britons who hold a more inclusive view of national identity, such behavior might seem shocking. However, it's important to realize that even polite questions of a similar nature still carry the same underlying assumption, that individuals like Hirsch aren't true Britons due to the color of their skin. This deeply ingrained and problematic belief is not confined to xenophobic Leave voters. It permeates throughout British society, underlining that the struggle to define British identity transcends the simple divide of the Brexit vote. Britain, a history of immigration. Anti-immigration sentiment in the United Kingdom has persisted for centuries, with Queen Elizabeth I expressing concern over immigrants as early as 1573. Historically, immigration to Britain has always been intertwined with race and religion, as evidenced by the Aliens Act of 1905, aimed at restricting European Jews from entering the UK. In reality, the British Isles have been home to various ethnic groups for millennia. However, mass immigration to the country began post-World War II, with an influx of immigrants from former British colonies such as the Caribbean, India, and Pakistan. Consequently, the UK saw several restrictive immigration policies enacted throughout the 1960s. Since then, the scope of immigration has broadened, as have the attendant anti-immigration backlashes, being exploited by politicians from both major political parties. Despite Britain now grappling with anti-immigration rhetoric due to events such as Brexit, this stance has existed within the nation for centuries. Queen Elizabeth I expressed her worries about immigrants arriving in England for work in 1573. Confusing immigration with race and religion is not new. The Aliens Act of 1905, which limited the influx of European Jews, is a prominent example of such conflation. Many Britons may not realize that the UK has always been a melting pot, home to various ethnic groups. A millennium ago, the British Isles comprised of Anglo, Saxon, Jute, Celtic, Roman, Mediterranean, Danish, and Norwegian populations. London, in 1500, had immigrants comprising 6% of its population. The transatlantic slave trade brought thousands of African individuals to Britain around the same time. Mass immigration, however, began following World War II, with people from former British colonies such as the Caribbean, India, and Pakistan migrating to the UK to fill labour shortages. As could be expected, anti-immigration sentiment surged once again. In the 1960s, the British government enacted a series of immigration restrictions led by both the Labour and the Conservative parties. Over time, the demographics of immigrants have diversified, including individuals from Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Central Europe, and Eastern Europe. Anti-immigration backlash has inevitably endured, and politicians from both major political parties have capitalized on this widespread sentiment. Labour Prime Minister Gordon Brown promised British jobs for British workers in 2007, while Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May's government proposed forcing companies to reveal their foreign worker numbers in 2016. Britain's rich history of immigration exemplifies how the integration of various cultures has continuously contributed to the nation's identity. As political parties continue to exploit these sentiments in the present day, it is crucial to acknowledge the historical context and ensure open-mindedness toward diverse populations. Unraveling the British narrative. The British national narrative claims that the UK is now a tolerant and open society, despite its historical past. However, looking below the surface, two flawed assumptions emerge: racial identities are seen as negative, and racism is thought to be a distant issue the country has overcome. Racial identity is an important and empowering aspect of many people's lives, connecting them to their shared heritage and culture. As author Afua Hirsch's life story reveals, the UK must recognize the significance of racial identity and confront the persistent racism that still exists today. The common belief amongst many British people, perpetuated by mainstream politicians and media sources, is that the UK is now a welcoming and inclusive nation that embraces all, no matter their race, religion, or origin. Frequently, people who hold this view claim to be colorblind, implying that they see the world without the influence of race. However, when we delve beneath the surface of this national narrative and the alleged color blindness, we encounter two deeply ingrained and problematic assumptions. Firstly, the notion of color blindness insinuates that racial identities are unwanted. By asserting that they don't see race, people portray this perspective as a strength, as if this viewpoint enables them to see the world as it should be, free from racial distinctions. This mindset implies that there is something inherently wrong with racial identities and that if they were eliminated, the world could achieve harmony. Yet, this approach denies the importance of racial identity in many people's lives. Racial identity is a powerful force that provides individuals with a sense of meaning, belonging, and connection. It binds groups together, linking them to common ancestry, history, and culture. The second assumption within the British national narrative is that racism is a distant problem the UK has overcome. However, this view fails to recognize the ongoing presence of racism in present-day Britain. Afua Hirsch's life story powerfully illustrates that there is still much progress to be made. Acknowledging the value of racial identity and addressing persisting racism are essential steps towards ensuring the United Kingdom truly becomes the inclusive and tolerant nation it claims to be. Affluence meets racism. Wimbledon, a well-known London suburb, is often associated with its annual tennis championship and affluence. Growing up there, Hirsch experienced the benefits of a privileged life filled with material comforts and opportunities, such as attending a private school and even acquiring work experience at a global advertising agency. Despite these advantages, Hirsch found herself struggling in the predominantly white community. As one of the few children of color, she was subject to teasing due to her physical differences, such as her hair and muscular legs. Hirsch also endured racist stereotypes and prejudices, being labeled scary and accused of theft. Such experiences left a lasting impact on Hirsch, demonstrating that racial discrimination penetrates even the most privileged environments. Unraveling racial identity. Growing up in a predominantly white society, Hirsch experienced a profound sense of otherness that distanced her from her British identity. This feeling was more than just physical differences, it stemmed from the historical context of racism in British society. Derogatory nicknames and racist jokes traced their roots back to the era of slavery, where enslaved black women were dehumanized, assaulted, and compared to animals. Today, this troubled history remains embedded in Western beauty standards, perpetuating a deeply rooted racial divide. As Hirsch grew up, she developed an acute sense of otherness, far beyond mere physical differences. This deep feeling of separation stemmed from the historical context of racism in the society she lived in, leaving her feeling like an outsider who didn't belong. When Hirsch entered her 20s, her otherness had intensified to the point of losing her British identity. But this identity crisis wasn't solely due to personal interactions with her white peers. It was crucial to analyze the broader context of British society in which these experiences took place. The hurtful nicknames and racist jokes Hirsch endured as a child carried significant baggage informed by racism in British history. These offensive remarks had roots stretching back to the time of slavery when enslaved black women were subjected to rape and sexual assault. To rationalize these heinous acts, some white people perpetuated the idea that black women were naturally hypersexual beings. Simultaneously, Europeans demeaned black women's physical appearances to further dehumanize and justify their treatment. Renowned intellectuals compared the features of black women to those of animals, using derogatory descriptions such as bestial fleece for their hair and likening their lips to the monkey tribe. This dark history has left a lasting legacy that remains entwined in Western beauty standards today. These standards uphold the racial divide established during the times of slavery and continue to alienate people like Hirsch from a sense of cultural belonging. In a world where accepting different identities is the key to unity, it's essential to acknowledge and understand these long-standing and deeply rooted impacts left by our troubled past. Challenging racial beauty standards. Mainstream media and advertising have long perpetuated beauty standards centered on white features, causing feelings of alienation and self-doubt for many women of color. As a child and teenager, the author, Hirsch, was exposed to these pervasive images that celebrated slender bodies, button noses, and light skin, all of which stood in stark contrast to her own appearance. Although current advertising campaigns may claim to embrace diversity by featuring models with varying ethnic backgrounds, the presence of white characteristics remains predominant. This internalization of beauty standards leads many non-white women to negatively compare themselves with their white counterparts, such as the author confessing her teenage disdain for her body. Beyond self-deprecation, however, these problematic standards drive countless black women to take more drastic measures, such as using skin-lightening creams or altering their natural hair to conform to ideals rooted in whiteness. Acknowledging these exhausting and harmful expectations is a critical step toward dismantling the rigidity of racial beauty constructs and fostering a more inclusive, empowering celebration of diverse beauty. Racial stereotypes and attraction. White beauty standards are internalized by both black and white people, shaping their interactions with one another. A core issue arises from the perception of black women as hypersexual, which leads white people to either fetishize or avoid dating them. Only 7% of male users on Yahoo Personals in 2010 expressed a willingness to date black women. Similarly, black men face the stereotype of hypersexuality, causing them to be seen as either sexually threatening or desirable. These stereotypes are influenced by historical portrayals in media and literature, which continue to perpetuate myths about black sexuality. Black women and men experience two pervasive stereotypes related to their sexuality that create significant problems in modern society. For black women, they are often perceived as hypersexual and sexually undesirable, creating contrasting reactions from white people. This results either in white individuals fetishizing black women as forbidden fruit, or dismissing the idea of dating them entirely. The notion of hypersexuality also extends to black men, resulting in contrasting dynamics that present them as both sexually threatening and desirable. Historical examples, such as post-World War I British newspaper headlines, exaggerated the dangers of black male sexuality, blaming them for sexual violence. Misleading information like this perpetuates harmful stereotypes about black men, raising the assumption of sexual threat. Contrastingly, the stereotype has led to the fetishization of black men's sexuality. Dating back to the 16th century, European writers narrated myths about African men that labeled them as lustful, sexually dominating, and anatomically different. Unfortunately, these distorted perspectives continue to influence the perception of black men's sexuality today, transforming them into an object of desire for some white individuals. In both cases, the intersection of white beauty standards and long-standing racial stereotypes contributes to the dehumanization and mistreatment of black individuals. To dismantle these notions, it is crucial to recognize the historical and societal underpinnings that perpetuate these damaging views, in order to create healthier, more equitable interactions for all. Unveiling racial stereotypes. The black community constantly faces numerous stereotypes, the association of blackness with crime being one of the most prominent. From an early age, black individuals are subjected to such prejudices. When examining the presence of black people in higher positions within society, it is evident that they are drastically underrepresented. Consequently, this leads to two common misconceptions that white people have when encountering successful black individuals, assuming they hold menial roles or attributing their success to extraordinary circumstances. Racial stereotypes continue to plague the black community, particularly in the United Kingdom and worldwide. A deeply rooted misconception is the association between black people and criminality, a notion that especially affects black males. For instance, when the author's sister introduced her newborn baby boy, he was immediately labeled as a little gangster, revealing the prevalence of these stereotypes before children even reach milestones such as talking or eating solid food. Another aspect where racial prejudices come into play is the underrepresentation of black people in eminent societal roles. Throughout her life, the author noticed that it was rare to find black individuals holding prestigious positions, often limited to menial jobs like janitorial work, mailroom, security, or kitchen staff. The author's personal experience recalls multiple occasions where she was the only person of color in a room, except for catering staff. This scarcity of black people in higher positions leads to two misconceived assumptions. Firstly, when white people meet someone like the author in a privileged setting, they often assume that she must be working in a subservient capacity. This has resulted in her being mistaken for waiting or cleaning staff at various events. Secondly, these individuals might think there must be an exceptional reason for her presence. For example, when dining at an upscale London restaurant, a known white columnist mistook the author for First Lady Michelle Obama. This incident exposes another stereotype, that all black people look alike. Therefore, in order to break free from these damaging preconceptions, it is crucial to challenge and dismantle these persistent stereotypes. Finding belonging amid differences. In her early 20s, Hirsch moved to Ghana, hoping to reconnect with her maternal roots and discover a sense of belonging. However, that proved difficult due to her biracial identity and lack of connection to Ghanaian culture, language, and traditions. Her experiences in Ghana eventually led her to recognize her British identity, despite its complexities. In her search for a lost sense of identity, Hirsch relocated to Ghana with her partner, Sam. She longed to find a connection with the maternal side of her family and a place she could finally belong. However, her journey didn't quite go as planned. Being biracial, she stood out both in the UK as other due to being seen as black and in Ghana, where people perceived her as white. The perception of her identity in Ghana was heightened by her inability to speak Twi, the local language, and her limited knowledge of Ghanaian culture, which went beyond what she had read in books. This disconnect stemmed from her upbringing as a normal British child, where her parents didn't emphasize their cultural heritage or teach her the language. Even her name, which carries the meaning "girl born on Friday" in Twi, served as a reminder of her disconnection, as she couldn't pronounce it like native Twi speakers would. While living in Ghana, two incidents further emphasized this sense of otherness. The first was a visit to a local food market, where her inability to communicate beyond saying "thank you" in Twi made her feel like an outsider, akin to a tourist with a guidebook. The second incident involved a terrifying encounter. Hirsch and Sam were robbed by a group of men at knife point on a beach one evening. Though they were unharmed, the hatred she saw in the assailants' eyes haunted her. To them, she was just another wealthy British individual in their impoverished country. Eventually, Hirsch made the decision to return to the UK. Her experiences in Ghana had made it clear that she was, indeed, British, no matter how complex her relationship with that identity may be. Beyond British versus Ghanaian identities. Hirsch initially believed that being British and Ghanaian were mutually exclusive identities. However, there is no inherent contradiction between them, as one's heritage can intertwine and complement the other. Realizing this may have come easier if she'd known the true interconnected history between the UK and her Ghanaian roots, which the conventional British narrative doesn't highlight. The narrative focuses on the British Empire's abolishment of the transatlantic slave trade in 1807, as an act of self-congratulation. However, the British economy kept benefiting from slavery, and the Empire was instrumental in creating the problem it supposedly resolved, as it participated in the slave trade with official support and became the leading supplier of enslaved people during the 18th century. The issues with the conventional British national narrative on slavery go further than simply overlooking these basic facts. Beyond the white savior. Popular culture, such as the movies Dangerous Minds, Freedom Riders, and The Help, often portrays white saviors who come to rescue marginalized groups. Similarly, British national narratives about slavery focus on white abolitionists like William Wilberforce, while overlooking contributions from black activists. The historical significance of black individuals like Olaudah Equiano and groups like Sons of Africa must be recognized to paint a complete picture of British history. These accounts shouldn't be confined to black history alone, since they are an integral part of British history. Acknowledging these contributions can help people of color see themselves in their nation's story. In various popular movies, a white central character is often positioned as the savior of marginalized groups, creating an unbalanced representation. This pattern also seeps into British narratives about slavery, with white abolitionists like William Wilberforce often receiving the sole credit for the abolition movement. Although his efforts were undeniably important, this perspective neglects the contributions of black abolitionists who fought alongside him. In 1787, a group of former enslaved people created the Sons of Africa, an abolitionist organization in the UK that published counterarguments against pro-slavery propaganda. Among its members was Olaudah Equiano, notable black abolitionist whose autobiography discussing his experiences with slavery influenced many at the time. Nevertheless, Equiano's name remains unfamiliar to most Britons. This historical sidelining is the result of relegating black individuals' achievements to black history, thus implying it separate from British history. In reality, moments and people like the Sons of Africa and Equiano are an intrinsic part of the broader British historical narrative. Recognizing the significance of black contributions in British history will not only provide a more accurate account but also offer a sense of belonging for people of color in the present day. By seeing their ancestors reflected in their nation's story, many can find a stronger sense of identity and connection to their national heritage. Unraveling British racial inequality. The author acknowledges her privileged upbringing, contrasting it with the hardships faced by her partner Sam, a first-generation Ghanaian immigrant. Statistics on racial inequality in the UK are cited to emphasize the disparities faced by people of color. Despite the author's personal advantages, she shares a sense of not belonging in her own country, along with many others who have chosen to move away in search of a stronger cultural identity. Recognizing the reality of these racial issues is crucial to addressing them. In the heart of London, two children grew up in strikingly different worlds. The author's childhood was one of safety and comfort, while her partner Sam, the son of Ghanaian immigrants, faced overcrowded housing, poverty, and crime in Tottenham. These contrasting upbringings highlight the disparities stemming from a complicated intertwining of race, immigration, and identity in the UK. Sam's story is far from an isolated incident. Pervasive racial inequality in the UK can be seen in statistics, such as the 2016 finding that 45% of black children were living in poverty, compared to roughly half that number for white children. Similarly, young black adults faced an unemployment rate more than double that of young white adults in 2017. Despite her privileged background, the author herself felt out of place in British society, leading her to move to another country where she couldn't speak the language in search of belonging. This sentiment is shared by thousands of other UK citizens, who face a pervasive sense of unwelcomeness due to their racial, ethnic, or religious backgrounds. Many have sought a sense of connection and acceptance by moving not only to African nations but also to countries like Pakistan and China. This exodus highlights the need for open acknowledgement and discussion of Britain's issues with race, immigration, and identity. With experiences like Sam's casting light on the depths of racial inequality in the UK, it becomes increasingly clear that denying the existence of these problems will do nothing to change them. To make progress, British society must first abandon the myth of colorblindness and openly confront the truth of racism's lingering impact.
Afua Hirsch's Brit, Getting Under the Skin of Britain's Race Problem, provides a compelling exploration into what it means to be British in a world fraught with racial and ethnic tensions. While discussing British identity, the impact of Brexit, and the history of racial inequality, the book reveals a multifaceted narrative on the experience of non-white individuals living in the UK. The author's personal journey exemplifies how Britain's deep-rooted racial issues have led thousands of people to move away from the country, in search of a place where they feel welcome and accepted. Throughout the book, Hirsch challenges the notion of British colorblindness and calls for society to acknowledge and address the race problem, as a necessary first step towards change.